Well, it's really funny because this milestone just kind of slid in the middle of kind of just what we're doing. And it's like, oh, as a matter of fact, happy anniversary, partners of mine and folks that come and participate with us each week, sometimes twice when we were so ambitious as to do it twice a week. We really we're trying to make the best use of whatever time we had in that moment over the summer. You know, we had a lot of time. No one had ever seen a summer at home, so we made the best use. And thanks to everyone who continued to join us.
Yeah, it's also going to be my last episode from the production closet here.
You're moving.
You're moving. The last corner of my place that's not been packed up into boxes. Like, I have this serene little corner for Zoom meetings this week. Everything else over there is a disaster. So as of next week, we'll be in new environs.
I know the feeling, man. It's crazy. Hey, I was gonna say to our students, that are here, if you guys have been here since like the beginning, who was here from like episode 1 that's still here today? I know the people are still coming in, but if anyone was even showed up in the single digits, like I see some of you.
Yeah, I do recognize a lot of names.
Oh, Annie. Too. Annie is here.
And you know what's nuts is that like even just seeing your names, like we feel like we know y'all.
Ray.
Mm-hmm. True story.
You've been a part of this story with us as much as we've been all intertwined into this story. It's 100%. Been really great.
Are we waiting on Jim?
Yeah, he's having some internet issues.
Okay.
As soon as Jim gets in here, we will
there's
kick
Mariah
things off.
Kennemer joining us today. Is that 5-1 over there? Or no, different David Norman, Hour 5 Norman.
Oh, let me look. I know he was maybe running a little bit late.
There's a David Norman in the audience.
Yeah, it looks like he's trying to get in.
Okay.
Here.
Somebody go and get a pass and get him in.
I'll run to the door with all access pass for him.
All right, David.
Hey, Charm.
5-1. You're outside today.
Nice.
Are you out? Is that really outside or is that the background?
You're going to see the dogs walking by in a minute.
Jim. The outdoor setup looking good.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm sick of being in the office.
Oh, right on. Look at you.
It happens.
It's beautiful. It's spring. Happy spring. Happy 1-year anniversary to TM 101. It's a year of Mondays today. We're stoked to be here with everybody. And we have Peter Yozell, which is going to be such a fantastic conversation. He's so on point with everything that we've been chatting over this last year about. As he was telling us his story and we were asking him how he went from place to place, he reiterated all of our touch points in such a perfect and organic manner that I'm just so excited to get into it now that everybody's here.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Welcome everyone again. And as our students are starting to join us, we have made it to 1-year anniversary, which we are just super humbled by and just have been super thankful to be part of this with everyone. Today is episode number 70. We are kicking back off our installment of In Conversation With. We are joined by Peter Yozell. And if you have yet to join us on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and like. And also, every Wednesday we do our Clubhouse sessions, so make sure to join us there. And like always, we're here every Monday. So just like every other episode, I'm going to pass it over to Henry to introduce guest and get this conversation kicked off.
Thank you, Mark. So I've only just had the pleasure of meeting our guest yesterday, but his reputation precedes him. In today's episode of A Discussion With, we meet a tour manager and a production manager with an amazing 20-year career with some of the most iconic acts in the last 30 years. But if you listen closely, you may hear a story that sounds very similar to yours and to the fundamentals we have been teaching here on TM 101 for anyone that is set on coming up in the touring industry. So everybody, let's please welcome Mr. Peter Yozell. Yay. Thanks for joining us, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was really happy to get you on this show. Like I said yesterday, like I'd been like I feel like I've been trying to meet you for a long time. I'd always seen Radiohead as like headliner on some festivals I was doing, but we're so busy, paths never cross. And also I felt like, like, oh man, the headliner of this festival, there's no way I'd be able to meet the tour manager. Like, it's nuts. But so I was really stoked to have you here today. But you're originally from the Boston area, right?
Yeah. I grew up outside Boston. Yeah.
Tim McKenna, if you're here or you're watching this, hello.
Yeah. Right. It's so interesting, Henry, what you just said about knowing, I have been at festivals. I literally was standing, kind of off, catching a moment of them at Bonnaroo before getting in a van and leaving with my artist. And when we're on site with someone as weighty as Radiohead, you just don't think you can bop on in to their compound and find their TM and go, hey, welcome to Tennessee. Let's get to know each other in the middle of your festival set, So
yeah, and obviously,
you wave and go, hey, people, hey, family, in reverence to the institution. And you get in your van and you go, God, I wish I could have stayed for that.
I've always only caught maybe,
yeah.
Out of all the times I've seen Radiohead, I probably have only seen maybe the first 30, 45 minutes of your set because I've never stayed to the end because I didn't want to get stuck in the traffic. So I was like, I had to bail the festival before it ended. So, but maybe someday I'll be able to catch it.
Am I a tour manager? Or am I a fan? Am I a tour manager? Or am I a fan? Do I get in that van or do I stay behind?
It's a choice. I mean, I'm a fan of Radiohead. So, but I mean, you beyond Radiohead, you have such an amazing career in the industry over 20 years. So, tell our students how you got that first spark of interest in the industry.
I remember as a kid going to see concerts in Boston at the old Boston Garden. My dad would take my brother and I to see shows, and my dad had a friend who worked there. And so after shows, we'd head down these corridors and get to a certain point, and this curtain would close. And I was always like, man, what's going on behind that curtain? Why can't we go back there? And that was that. And then when I was in college, I went out on tour with my cousin, Chris, who's the singer of the Spin Doctors. And he invited me out while I was in college just to come hang out. And I got a taste of the camaraderie of being on the road and what everybody was doing out there, and being a part of this, group of people putting on a show and entertaining people. And it just felt really great being around that vibe. I had worked in some office jobs, 9-to-5 stuff that was, didn't feel quite right for me. And so, that felt like the kind of place I wanted to be in terms of work and, where I want to put my efforts. And
what an amazing experience to just be able to sort of walk into that backstage lifestyle and see it as a guest like that. That must have been a really cool thing to see. And really, I could see how that could shape a lot of your, your career. But you told an amazing story to me yesterday about being on tour with the Spin Doctors for some time, and you did some dates through Texas and New Orleans. Mm-hmm. Do you mind sharing that story? Because I think that it's a fascinating way to first sort of see our world.
So yeah, I flew out to Dallas, and the band had just come off a break, and I was sat on the at the front of the bus and waiting for people to get on the bus, and everyone's loading on, and there was just all of a sudden just like everybody's like hugging and how you been and how was your break, and I'm seeing this camaraderie. And then there's a tour manager there like handing out like $20 bills per diem. So I learned what per diem was pretty quick. I was like, well, I like $20 in hand. But more importantly, like I said, just like seeing all these guys coming back together from a break and really caring about each other in their workplace. And so, I thought, man, how can I get into that kind of workplace? And so, I asked my cousin's tour manager, what his ideas were for like, how do I get into this, And he said, hang out with bands, meet bands, hang out with bands, offer your services, do whatever you can do, drive the van, move gear, plug in guitars, help where you can. And, but also figure out who you want to be out there, because there are many roles. And so it's important, as you're pursuing it, you want to kind of know what your end goal is. Are you a guitar tech? Are you a lighting guy? Are you a tour manager?
Right.
And so I had some retail management experience, and that seemed to kind of lend to, being a tour manager.
Then from there, from seeing that, then what was your first leap into actually touring?
I had moved to New York after college, and a band that I had met in New York, a year or so prior, I was hanging out with them and just kind of kept saying, if you ever need any help, I'm here.
Yeah.
And one day I got a call and they're like, you want to drive the van out to New Jersey with us and do a show? And I was just like, hell yes. And I got in the van and drove it over to the lockup and loaded all the gear and got everything together and picked up the guys, and we drove out to New Jersey. And then, so I started driving around with them and, along the East Coast and up to Maine. And that was the start there.
And how old were you at this time? What year was it?
This was the end of 1996. So I just turned 25.
Oh, wow. This is a good year for music.
Yeah. Especially being the year that I got to, start this off. So it was, going from, kind of one van to the next van. And I did some work with my cousin, Chris, when he was doing some solo stuff, and we were driving around, that same kind of East Coast routine. And then we ended up going out on a Horde festival, which was in 1998. And that kind of gave me my first experience traveling around America and actually, doing tour managerial work. But I was learning, and I was, just trying to pay attention to everything I could pay attention to. Chris was really great with like instruction of like, hey, we're about an hour outside of this city. You might want to call the hotel, let them know we're showing up, see if they're ready for us. And excuse me. And so learning like that, and just, witnessing everybody. The Horde Festival was, a traveling, circus, many bands, many production managers, many tour managers, many, people doing everything. And so I just started paying attention to what people were doing, whether it was like having your Sharpie attached to your lanyard, because it's always something you need, or, whatever it might be that you kind of want to have on the ready, because you just see how quickly things are moving, and you want to, keep the pace with everyone and be ready for whatever.
I just want to jump in and say that Horde Fest, for folks who may not know, is a legacy jam band festival that traipses across the US, and it's just as monstrous as like a Warped or an Ozfest or a Lollapalooza. It's a thing that, creeps across, and those environments, particularly outdoor production. I was doing outdoor production in the mid 90s as well, and that's a great way to learn how to be effective and also do so in the elements, which is a whole nother layer.
Yeah, I mean, and also Peter, this had to be such a pivotal point for you, because you were just being engulfed in so much. Chris, I'm looking here during this time. Chris was one of the first people to tell you how to advance or teach, right?
I lost your audio there. Sorry.
This had to be such a pivotal point.
You're glitching a little bit.
Am I?
Yeah.
Is this better?
Go one more time.
Is it now?
Mm-mm.
Well, here, then, if someone else would like to pick it up, Adrian, if you'd like to.
Yeah, stand by. I'm gonna start it, because now I think it's working. But he was just saying that Chris was the guy that taught you to advance, and in that way that he was like, hey, just suggestions, and that triggered you to start thinking ahead as well, you were saying yesterday.
Yeah. And looking at, starting to kind of teach myself logistics and, get a sense of how long it took to get from a hotel to a venue in a certain city at a certain time. And that sort of formula is all across the board, and as you travel around and you go city to city and, between venue to venue or hotel to venue, airports, all those things, you want to have a sense of what that timing is, because you're on a schedule. You want to get to an airport in due time and not miss a flight. You want to get, to the venue for sound check from the hotel and be there timely. You want to know what time you're moving and what traffic's like. And it's fairly consistent, city to city. And so it's something I picked up
absolutely.
on.
How's my sound right now? Is it okay?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
As we're following this timeline along, I'm looking here at some points that we talked about where you had mentioned that you were really into Ben Harper, and one day you see Ben in catering. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was so Chris was hosting the workshop stage on the Horde Festival. It was like a smaller third stage, and it was there for the artists on tour to come around and do whatever they felt like, play whatever with whoever, by themselves, with others. And this was at the start of the run, and we were just trying to work out, who to get over to come over. And so I was like, it's Ben Harper, and I'm here to do a job, so I'm gonna go up and politely introduce myself and tell him what we're up to and see if he's interested in hanging out on the workshop stage at all. And he couldn't have been, more gracious and such a great guy, an incredible musician. And he came over to our stage like almost every show day and did some solo stuff and was working out new material. And it was just fantastic, to kick it off like that. And then Chris started getting into the groove of like talking to the other artists on tour and introducing himself as well, and getting, a whole bunch of people to come over. Warren Haynes did a bunch of stuff, and Jay Bellerose played a bunch of drums, and it was cool to be able to meet all those guys and kind of working this small stage that was just sort of always rotating and always changing. And again, like an incredible learning experience to just pick up on how different artists work, different musicians work. And yeah, I learned a ton through that. We had a smaller band from New Jersey ended up coming and playing on our stage a little bit, and they were part of kind of the Blues Traveler family and the Horde Festival family. And I ended up jumping in the van with them a handful of months after the Horde Festival, and that kind of got me on to the next phase of moving around the country and learning different venues and so forth. We went out to Colorado for a New Year's show, and then ended up going to San Francisco, where they wanted to, try and crack the music scene there. And so that was a springboard for me. And it just part of that, the whole idea of, keep trying to find those opportunities, keep trying to meet people, keep trying to let people know who you are and what you do. And that if they ever needed something, or whatever, that you're available. And so, I'd said to these guys on that Horde Festival, yeah, if you ever need someone to get in the van, and then next thing you know, I'm in the van. And San Francisco became a really integral part to my career, and people that I met there in the industry and the opportunities I was given there. I started working at Bill Graham Presents. And this was just before BGP went on to be, I guess SFX was the next in line. But I got to work a lot of local production gigs there, which again, like you're just meeting tours as they come through, and you're seeing different tour managers, different production managers, different crews, and how they operate. And you get a real sense of what it's like to be on tour when you're working locally. And so I was working production assistant gigs on larger like radio festivals. I started working in it was called the ambiance department at Bill Graham Presents. And they had a warehouse full of sofas and rugs and end tables and lamps. And we'd go to like sports arenas and kid out locker rooms.
Hey, Peter, can you explain in case our students don't know what ambiance is, can you explain exactly what that is and what you did for that?
Wow, those of us who do back of house totally geek out over this. This is so great.
Ambiance is is creating a mood and a vibe in a room with objects, essentially. And those objects are couches and places that are comfortable to sit, and lighting that makes it feel, I guess, warm and cozy. Some people might have like a lava lamp. I don't think we ever did lava lamps, but that would be ambiance, I
I'm
think.
sure they had some.
Yeah, they probably did actually. But you know, and it was interesting when we had different acts come through, because that would, you change the ambiance, you know. We were doing like Crosby, Stills and Nash in Oakland, and we had to use certain tapestries, and actually they traveled with dressing room kits and then asked us to like integrate those with our stuff to set things up. And you know, you learn all these interesting things. I think it was I don't remember which CSN Crosby, Stills, Nash dress room it was, but afterwards there's like this little pile of salt in the corner, and I think it was from, you know, whatever pre-show ritual or type of thing that this artist did. Like, you just notice these things, these little things, and you're creating, you know, you're trying to create a comfortable space for these people to be, you know, before sound check, after sound check, before the show. And a lot of what it taught me was what I still kind of bring to the table now, or try at least, is you know, my goal with the band is to always try and give them, you know, an organized and detailed schedule that can help them be at their best when I put them on stage, and in bands at their best, and the crowd is reacting, and that comes together. That's like for me, that's like the magic moment. And I'm still pinching myself standing on stage left, like watching any of the acts I put on stage. And now I'm incredibly fortunate to have landed a gig with my, you know, absolute favorite band. And like Adrian was saying before, like, am I working? Am I a fan? Am I working? Am I a fan? Sometimes you gotta, that's the other thing that's really important, is when you're working, you are working, and you can be a fan, but don't get lost in it.
Yeah.
Because there's still a job to do. And, you know, do I want to see this encore, or do I have to run back and make sure the vans are in place so we can, you know, do the runner we're planning? And
Peter, yesterday in our prep, you had discussed two big formative moments at the Mountain Air Festival. Can you kind of go over those with us, and what those situations were?
Yeah. So early on, when I got out to San Francisco and just trying to be around the music, I went to, it's Calaveras County, where BGP did a festival called Mountain Air, and there was a handful of bands in the bill, and Ben Harper was one of them. So my cousin Jeremy and I were lucky enough to be able to show up on the production day, park our van backstage and set up, and then watch sound checks. And I think it was Mickey Hart, Planet Drum, they were sound checking, and we were sat out front like watching, and he probably knew it, but it was a live mic, and Mickey Hart was having an issue with his drums, and he was just giving his tech, you know, an earful, and he finished by saying to his tech, "I don't care what you do or how you do it, just fix this and make it right." And at first you might think like, God, he's really laying into this guy. But what I took from it was that he gave that tech all the power in the world to use his abilities to make something right and do it the way he thinks, you know, or thought it should be done. And there's something that I took from that in terms of, you know, the belief in yourself and your abilities, and the fact that you've been hired to do a job because you're good at the job, and you can be steps ahead, and, you know, take care of things without it setting anything back too much. And so, you know, that was a big lesson for me, and how I approach things now. But also, I was sat with a group of people, and was talking to this woman, and, you know, she asked me what I was doing there, and I told her, and some of the people I knew, and we knew a lot. Again, this was through like Horde Festival connections and Blues Traveler, and we knew a lot of the same people. And she was like, "Well, you know, my husband's the production manager on this festival, and maybe we could help you out sometime if you want to send me your resume." And so that was just, you know, that's just fate. I mean, and again, but being around it and talking to people, and letting people know who I was and what I was trying to do. And so a few months later, Nigel James is the production manager, and he called me up out of the blue and was just sort of like, I don't really know who you are, but a few people say I need to give you a chance. And that those, the few people thing was, again, like me trying to make contacts, like who knows who can I meet? Who can I, meet through that? I guess networking, if you will. And so I went down to Shoreline Amphitheater and worked the weekend with Nigel, helping out with all the local crew stuff and all the incoming bands and credentials and tickets and dressing rooms and hospitality and anything and everything that I could do. And that ended up being a really pivotal point for me, where Nigel hired me for some other gigs, and that helped me land the ambiance department gig. And I did gigs as a runner, driving around picking up stuff locally for touring productions, and again, like doing anything and everything I could. And when I was doing one thing, I was trying to pay attention to the other things too, because it's all swirling around you, and I wanted to know what everyone was doing. And I think that was that mentality of being a manager. As a retail manager, I was responsible for all these people on the floor, and it seemed the same thing to me for touring. Like, as a tour manager, you want to be responsible to all the people on the tour. And I always try and make sure that everybody knows that. I'm big on checking in with people, but only in a sense of like, how you doing? Everything cool? You're good? Good. That's that. The beauty, there is like having people around me that are incredible at their jobs, and you hire them because they are, and you don't need to micromanage, but you need to be available, and you need to let people know you're available. And then, I go back to my office and handle my business and do the things I need to be doing to get ready for a show and whatever that entails.
Hey, Peter, you talked about your oh, go ahead, Adrian.
I'm sorry. I wanted to just make a marker there. So many touch points of things that we've been teaching along the way about get the runner gig, get in the building, for folks who are just starting out, get in there and do the job, do the work, be a runner. If you have that opportunity, be in the production office, keep your ears open and be a sponge. And you've literally just illustrated how doing that propelled you forward, and your trajectory has just been consistent in, having the passion and gathering the knowledge. And that's been, I just want to make mention of all the different touch points of the ecology of how you would be successful in this business are being illustrated right now by Pete.
And on that same point, I mean, you talked about working in the ambient department, which people like, well, you're just putting in couches or putting up tapestries in dressing rooms. But can yesterday you told us a couple stories like about Prince and what you learned from just being there and learning from artists or learning from other people while you were doing your job, which some people might not think is being a big deal, but you learned from that and it helped your career.
Yeah, we would load in the morning and set up dressing rooms, and then essentially just, kind of needed to just be out of the way for the rest of the day and wait for loadout to get the stuff back and to the warehouse. But there was opportunity to stick around and hang out in catering and just be out of the way, or hang out near the production office and be taking in what's all going on, like, and watching load-ins happen when trucks arrive and how that all worked. And so I started using that time between, my work of loading in and setting up and loading out. I started using that time to just take in everything that was happening and see who is who and learn, who is doing what, and watch touring production office get set up, see road cases come in, watch what was happening by the stage, security, going out front, just walking around venues, learning all the aspects of a venue. There's a front door, there's a back door, there's side doors. And it was cool to be able to do that. And one of the times just being around, and being in the right place, we had loaded in, it was at San Jose State, and set up dressing rooms for a Prince concert. And just from being around, we were in the right place, and they're like, we need you to move a coffee table in Prince's dressing room. Okay, cool. And they're like, but he's in there already. So it's really important that you get in and get out. And it just needs to turn 90 degrees, face the other way. All right, cool. And so I grabbed one of my coworkers, and we walked down this corridor to the dressing room. And I'm like, we're going to go in there. You'll go to the far side. I'll go to the near side. We'll move it real quick, place it down gently, and get out. And we walked in, and that's what we did. And you can't help but notice that Prince is sitting there in a chair by a makeup mirror. And again, you kind of want to let the fan jump out of you, but you're working, and it's like that. You got to stay focused on the job at hand. But I did catch him out of the corner of my eye, and it was sort of that. It felt like that scene from Purple Rain, but minus the little puppet. But he was just fixed, and that was a lesson of learning. Leaving an artist to be in their space, and occasionally you have to go into a dressing room when somebody's they might be doing their pre-show, yoga routine or stretching or something, but you've got to have, for me, like 15 minutes, when you're giving stage time warnings, it's like how you open the door and how you deliver that info that, helps keep things in the pace they should be going.
Yeah, that's great. And what point did you realize that you no longer needed a side hustle, that this was your career, and that you were working in the music business?
I think it was probably that summer with BGP doing, the ambient stuff and runner and production assistant work. And I was able to string enough of it along that I could pay my rent. Fortunately, I lived in a part of San Francisco at the time that was like deep in the Mission, but for $300 a month, I can do this. And so, that let me, I had just enough work with BGP that I could stop waiting tables. And I think for me, that felt like where I had really moved into the realm of being in the music industry. And those BGP jobs got me through to the end of 99, doing another one of the radio festivals. And we were sharing a production office with Touring Productions, and one of the bands was 311, and their production manager was John Lafferty. And I had given him my card and said, after talking to him a little bit during the day and working alongside him a little, sharing the office like that, he was like, yeah, I'll pass it on to our tour manager. And I'd met the tour manager earlier when he came in and really wanted more guest tickets for his band. And I was like, man, if I had more tickets, I'd give you whatever I have, but I don't have any more tickets. And but you can go down and see the radio, station folks, and they could probably help you. I'll show you where that office is if you want. And he had said to me later that part of the reason he wanted to hire me was because he was used to getting everything he wanted. And I'm like the first person that just very graciously and honestly said, like, I can't give you what you want, but I can help you in another way if that is good for you. And but so I ended up getting the tour assistant gig with 311. This was in early 2000. And that was another great experience of learning. I traveled with the crew, and in the morning and most of the afternoon, I was working as, a production assistant. And when the band would come in before sound check, I'm a band assistant. And so I'm seeing both sides of it that way as well. And how those two, your A party and C party, if you will, artist crew, how those two parties work together. And depending on the size of a tour, it can all be one thing. As tours get bigger and there's larger productions, those things become kind of separate. They work together, but on different schedules and routines. And it's just, all of this has just been amazing still to this day, where I can be out there and have a really good sense of what everybody's doing and what their job entails. And they're the experts, and I like leaving them to be the experts, but I like them to also know that I understand what they're doing. I understand what their hours are like. I understand what their day is like. And all of it is from just having been around, locally and touring worlds and paying attention to all of what people are doing.
I think that's another really important thing that we've tried to stress on TM 101 from the start, is that getting as broad a spectrum of experience within this industry is going to serve you well. So it's 2000, you've got your first tour as a production assistant. Where does it go from here? And what's your next steps in the music industry?
I wanted to be a tour manager. That was always the goal. And so I started reaching out to people because I felt more comfortable with the knowledge I had at that point of saying, I'm ready to be a tour manager, more than just an assistant. And so I got in touch with a friend who was working with Les Claypool, and Les was doing his first solo tour with the Flying Frog Brigade. And a guy named Derek Featherstone was Les's sort of production coordinator, and he had advanced all of the tour, and they hired me to go out and road manage, essentially. And so Derek sort of hands me all this advance notes and things, and then I went out and did the road managing, and it was just an amazing experience, like being, now I'm like working closer with a band, and Les was just one of the hardest working dudes I've been around. Our first run was some dates along the West Coast up to Seattle, and we did it all in this Airstream that Les had, and he drove the Airstream and he played shows. And when the Airstream broke down, he pulls the engine apart and just jumps in there and like fixes it on the side of the highway. I'm like, what can I do? And he's like, I think we might need this part. You might want to find like a Napa or some sort of auto parts store. And I'm like, God, in the middle, we're sort of in the middle of nowhere, but you find a way and you just keep, working towards fixing and correcting and moving forward. And so, yeah, we ended up being able to find this part, hand it off to him. He gets back in there and fixes this thing, jumps back in the seat, fires it up, and he's like, here we go. And he kind of sounds like that. Here we go. And just the work ethic, that really stuck with me. And so Les and I did a couple tours, and I was able to do one of them, which was a winter festival, and we needed a production manager. And this was sort of my first, foray into hiring, a production manager. I had recommended John Lafferty, who I assisted on 311. I recommended him to Derek Featherstone, and John got that gig. And it just felt amazing to be, back on tour with this guy who sort of plucked me out of San Francisco. And, you realize, like, it's an honor to work with people in our industry. It really, truly is. It's incredible to meet people who care as much as somebody like John Lafferty, and be able to work alongside someone like that. And so we did that, and it was my hope that I could like get gigs with John for the rest of my career, and that didn't happen for a while, but it did come back around, and I
got to do one so far with John Lafferty, one tour.
Yeah, you were telling a really great story yesterday.
One tour. We did Conan O'Brien's only single tour together, and John Lafferty just happened to be the production manager on that one. It was fantastic. We were teaching TV people how to do a tour, and the interesting thing, just a sidebar, is that folks thought they got a comedian who was going to do some stand-up, and he brought with the whole Jimmy Vivino and the whole band and a 30-foot inflatable and, you know, backup singers and a wardrobe department that needed an entire room. And it was really something. John Lafferty was fantastic. Conan loved him. Nicest guy on the planet.
I got to advance with him years ago when he was with Il Divo and at the SECC in Glasgow, but it was the end of the tour. So we had, it was just a great advance. This is super geeky, but this is how organized he is. And as you know, Peter, but it was like, okay, we have half the stuff that needs to go into sea containers and half the stuff that's staying here. And so we had to do a double loadout, and we had to do like, you know, like forklifts over here and forklifts over here and a separate thing. And it was one of the most pleasurable advances I've done. It was just so great. He's such a great guy to work. So I haven't worked with him on tour, but as a promoter rep, I have. How
many different color neon gaff tapes was he using to mark what goes where?
A million.
Right?
A million. He brings great joy to what he does. It's a pleasure to work with people like that.
Yeah, he cares about his job, and even more so, he cares about all the people that he's working with, touring wise, locally, all of it.
And speaking of caring, there's a tremendous testament to yours and John's comfort that you give. Austin Stillwell is in our chat, and he says, having been a crew member on Peter's tour, I must say he and John Lafferty make every person on that tour feel like an equal part of the family, seen, taken care of, and empowered to do our jobs to our fullest ability. Kudos to you.
Thank you, Austin.
Yeah, kudos. That's real time.
He's rad.
That's high praise. That's a really beautiful tribute there. So
yeah, that's all we can ever strive to do as tour managers, right? I hope our folks feel that way about us.
Yeah.
And then tell somebody that they feel that way about us.
Yeah.
So I think from here you went on to work with Jerry Cantrell. Am I right?
Yeah. Now I'm thinking of it in this like small little-ish line of like these guys doing their sort of first solo outings or early solo outings. Yeah, Les is first, and then this was an early one for Jerry, and I spent a little time with him, and that was, you know, another glimpse at you know, shows and the difference in fans and venues. And that was the first time I had done the advance myself. And I remember
I did a second record after you did. And just, we were discussing yesterday too, just the interconnectedness of this industry and the small world, is that the tour manager or the front of house guy on that was Josh Paul, who was also Henry's first tour manager on Yellow Card, I believe.
Yeah, he taught me.
And I trained to be a production manager and a tour manager after that. So it's like this connection of not knowing that we had met or knew each other, but our lives still interconnected in that weird way that happens in this industry.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then after Jerry, you got a call sitting on a bus in front of the Vic in Chicago, right?
Yeah, this was shortly after that. There's I don't know, maybe a couple of things dotted in there, but I had on the 311 tour, one of the support acts was Alien Ant Farm, and I became friendly with Michelle Moses, who is their manager, and I was on a tour riding into Chicago, asleep on the bus, and I woke up outside the venue at the Vic and went in to start the day. And I just remembered having this dream that night that somebody from a management company, specific company or something, called me and offered me this really great opportunity. And I just was like, oh, that's a cool dream. And I just went about my day. And my phone rang that afternoon, and it was Michelle Moses. And she's like, I just put you forward to be a production manager for Morrissey. And I'm like, wow, I think I had this dream last night that you called me. And she was just like, no way. But anyways, so you want this production manager gig? And I'm like, well, I'm a tour manager. I don't know much about production manager. And she was like, well, you advance tours and you hire crew, you know, and you want to make X amount of money a week. And I was like, I think I'm a production manager. And it was just like with the tour management thing, trying to pay attention to the details, and then not being afraid to ask questions of somebody you trust with their knowledge. And so I called John Lafferty and was like, I got this gig. I know what I'm doing, but I don't know everything about what I'm doing. And John was really gracious and let me, pick his brain. He shared riders with me. He shared information that helped me, figure out how to be a production manager. But I knew that, there's some technical things that just weren't my forte. And so when we gathered the Morrissey crew the first time at rehearsals, I sort of sat down with everybody, and they were all, these cats from England who had been with Moz forever, and they had their sort of ways about them. And I just sort of said, please tell me what it is you need, anything specific. Here's, what we're doing in terms of like what we're carrying, board groups, but what we're not carrying, like racks and stacks. So whatever you need locally, let me know, and I'll make sure to get what you need. And they're all like, sure, yeah, sure. And then I don't think a single one of them really told me anything that they needed, and they just wanted to see this, if it was sink or swim. And so back to John Lafferty, more questions, they don't really want to tell me. He's like, well, here's, talk to the promoter and see what they do locally. And, so again, just asking the right questions and trying to be smart, thinking about, what it takes to put on a show and be on tour. And those parts are all, it's kind of universal in a way. They change tour to tour, obviously, but the basis of things, you kind of get a sense, and then you deliver, you get what's needed. And so I learned how to be a production manager. I also learned a little bit about, taking care of a crew versus taking care of the artist. And I thought for a minute, I'm like, oh man, it'd be so great to take care of the crew. I don't have to look after a band. And then I realized that the crew, and this is the importance of it, is that the crew start first and they finish last. And it's really important that everybody's taken care of the same way: the artists, the crew, the families that come out. And we do a lot of family on tour with the Radiohead world. And my thing is always just to look after everybody as best as I can, and make sure people have what they need. And so after a little bit of, I did a little more production managing work, and then I got right back into tour managing after just a couple of PM gigs. And I did some cool stuff again, like a solo guy, and learning a lot from somebody. I don't think I mentioned this yesterday, but I toured for a minute with Chris Cornell, and I noticed the picture behind you, Adrian. And Chris was also incredible about talking to me about his career and the way things operate in Soundgarden, and the way that he was doing things with Audio Slave, and now doing this solo thing. And also too, there's a learning curve there with when you have a solo artist and a band, and they kind of operate separately, it's another part of realizing, looking out for everyone and making sure the band have what they need, even though you're.
What year was that you were with Chris Cornell?
2007. Yeah. And
saw those shows.
And so I remember he and I were traveling on the B and C markets on all the Southwest flights we could possibly get. And we're sat at a gate one day, and I saw somebody go up and they walk away with this blue placard. On Southwest, you try and get your seats as fast as you can, your ticket as fast as you can 24 hours in advance, so that you can get aboard first. And this was pushing the envelope a little bit, but I think it's what Chris needed. And so I would go up to the check-in stand and say, you know, I'm traveling with a VIP, and it'd be great if we could board first and just kind of get on the plane and out of the way, so we don't bother anyone and just can get out of the way. And I was like, you know, he's got a little bit of a nervous condition, so maybe you could help me out. And I point over my shoulder and they see him, and he always just kind of was drumming his knee anyhow. And they're like, oh yeah, sure, here's your placard. And I went and sat down next to him. I'm like, boarding first. And he was like, great, how'd you do that? And I was like, I told him I was a really nervous flyer. And he was like, nice one. And so, you know, it's I don't know, the point of this story is just taking the onus off your artist. And again, like we kind of touched on yesterday, making them think that everything's okay.
It's so good.
And even if it's not, you know, you're old.
I wanted to, Peter, go back to when you were talking about John Lafferty and just the touch point that we literally had a clubhouse about networking 2 weeks ago, and that networking isn't always about projecting forward, but who your resources are when you need some information. And I just wanted to, again, illustrate how you and the trajectory of your career are executing these touch points that we talk about. You're not a production manager until you're a production manager, and you're just managing. So you staff up with amazing people and you use your network of resources to pull together the knowledge that you need in the moment to continue down that path. Important illustration. That's awesome. And that.
Oh, I think Adrian.
And that was also a very great story about the man on my wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yes, anticipating the needs. We talk about that a lot, using your spidey senses.
Yeah. All
right, MJ, over to you.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was about this time you said that you made a connection when you were at I think you said you were at Coney Island, that kind of started you on the trajectory to where you are now. So can you talk about how that happened?
Yeah. Doing a show at the ballpark in Coney Island, a friend was there and mentioned to me that a manager friend of hers was flying into JFK with one of his acts, and they wanted to come see the show. And I just had said, you know, have them come to the backstage gate when they get here, and we'll, you know, whisk them in and take care of it. And so this guy arrives with his band. It was Chris Hufford, who is from Courtyard Management. And the band was Supergrass, Gaz Combs and his gang of merry men. And I, you know, whisked him in and walked him across the ballpark and into the side stage area, and got him some drinks, got him comfortable. The band at the time liked to have audio on the side of the stage so people could actually hang out. And so we ended up chatting a little bit, and then when the show ended, we talked a little bit more and just talked about staying in touch, and, you know, maybe we could do some work together someday. And so over the next few years, I kept kind of crossing paths with Chris a little bit and realizing mutual friends. I had also done some work with Nigel Godrich when we did the pilot for From the Basement. And so that ended up being another connection to that world. And when Tom first decided to do the Eraser live, Chris gave me a call because they were working in LA. And this was I met him in 2005. And in 4 years later, he reached out and was like, we're looking for LA crew. And I thought of you. And so I got that gig with Tom's first solo shows, which were, at the time, I think we just had like 5 question marks on the marquee. It was before they started calling the band Atoms for Peace. And so that was the start. It was the fall of 2009. We took a house in Laurel Canyon and turned it into a rehearsal studio, and then outfitted it with furniture and so forth. So I'm like harkening back to my ambiance days as I start ordering all these beds and different bits of furniture to make a live work space in this house in Laurel Canyon.
Once you have a skill like that, it's part of your war chest of skill sets that you just instantaneously pull from.
Yeah. And one, I should tell this really quick because this I think is important. Those office jobs I was working, even though even though I didn't care for it all that much, I realized you can't overlook what you're learning whenever you're doing whatever you're doing, because Bill Graham Civic setting up for New Year's Eve, the Millennium New Year's Eve, this giant photocopier comes rolling in and everyone's like, what do we do with that? Nobody knew how to deal with it. And I was like, actually I do, because that's all I used to do in my co-op jobs was like work the photocopier, making tons of copies and like passing information around the office. And they were like, thank God the college kids here, you know. But it occurred to me that that's, you know, you're always learning. And even if you don't really, if it's not your passion, you still got to pay attention, because you never know when something's going to, you know, translate to something else. But I don't know, I just went off on a tangent a little bit, but.
No, so I think you were talking about how you're working with Tom at and rehearsing for that, doing those shows, but then out of that, you got asked to work with Radiohead. So you must have made a good impression.
I think so. I guess, yeah. Thankfully, they asked me. The Radiohead came to Los Angeles in January of 2010 to start recording what became King of Limbs, and they're a band that prefers something more unconventional, like a private home to like the, you know, a black box recording studio. They like light and nature and it's inspiring. And so we were given a house in the Hollywood Hills, and I was brought in to liaise between the band and the homeowners. And essentially, I guess studio managing is what it was, but, you know, looking after everybody, and whether it was like, you know, bring this stuff to a dry cleaner, or can you find me this or get me that, and so forth. That was my first bit of work with them. And while we were doing that recording, they wanted to play a show. And so it was right after the earthquake in Haiti. And so it was kind of suggested maybe they play a show and do a benefit. So we were sat around the kitchen, I think on a Monday afternoon, and they were saying about doing a show. And I was like, well, where do you want, you know, how many people would you like to play for? And they said something like 1,000. And so I immediately thought of the Fonda in LA, and I looked it up and saw that it was available the next Sunday. And so they're like, and then how do we charge people like for a benefit show? And I had met some people at Ticketmaster a few years earlier, and they were talking to me about ticket auctions. And I thought it was an interesting idea to give people an opportunity to kind of, you know, pay what they want to get a certain, you know, category of seat or entry into a venue. But more importantly, I thought it was a way, you know, to hopefully raise a bunch of money for Haiti, because I'm thinking it's Radiohead at the Fonda. Just, it's incredible.
And you were doing it in like a week, right?
Yeah, we had like one short week, and so they agreed. We got with the promoters, it was Golden Voice, and agreed to do it on a Wednesday. Opened a ticket auction on Thursday, closed on Saturday, and played on Sunday, and we raised $600,000.
Brilliant,
amazing.
And it was just, you know, I felt 6 inches off the floor the whole night. It was such an incredible experience. And it turned out to be, I guess, a little bit of a dress rehearsal of me being a tour manager and doing a show with the band. Because the next thing was in the fall of 2011, and they asked me to tour manage a trip to New York for SNL and a couple of shows at Roseland. Mm. And
how long of a time between that pop-up benefit show and that trip to New York was there?
So it was January 2010 was the first work with Radiohead. In the spring of 2010 was when it became Atoms for Peace, and I was back working with Tom and the guys in Atoms. We did that spring run, and then it wasn't again until it was the fall of 2011, when Radiohead went to New York and they asked me to do that work. And that led to proper touring where I started with them. And it was February 2012, my first tour with them. And we started in Miami, and Colin, our bass player, likes to show up a little early and just acclimate. And so we met in Miami before everyone else came in, and you know, it's always kind of been my way to, like, you know, we should have dinner and we should do something fun, you know, we don't need to just sit in a hotel, you know, or around the hotel and experience some stuff. And so we went to see a Miami Heat basketball game. It was his first time seeing a professional basketball game, and you know,
go Heat. Did you see D Wade? Was it awesome? Did we win?
I think they did win. Yeah. And that was D Wade days.
I've taken a few people from the UK to like their first American sporting event, and it's really fun because it's kind of nuts. Like
that's a spectacle. It's a spectacle. It's a spectacle. The sporting spectacle. Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah.
There's a lot of multimedia that they're I ended up
and he does a lot with fire, and they have these big, you know, it's just, they do a lot of really amazing stuff in the AAA, and things come up and down, and the, you know, the sun in neon and the flames everywhere. It's a big deal. Yeah.
More stimulus, less threat of violence.
Exactly. You can sit together. You can sit together with fans of the other team and not get mauled. But I ended up one time taking somebody on one of those things. We were playing at the arena the next day, but there was a basketball game the night before, so we all went down and we were in a box, and I ended up on the kiss cam with my boss, you know, and I'm like, it's my boss, you know. So I was like, no,
that's really
married.
Funny. Of course you did, right?
I'm like mouthing, he's married, it's my boss, you know. So really that's funny. Great. But you know what? It's like, I think you were talking about that yesterday, about how it's those little things that you just do that you don't always even realize or noticed. But then, like you were talking about how you found a vegan restaurant in Phoenix, and it's things like that you just do, but then you realize like how important, how much it clicks, you know?
Yeah. And that was, you know, again, like using some forethought. I was on one tour, day off in Phoenix, and I knew I had this other tour coming up, and I had a sense of like, what are people's diets? What do they like to do? You know, how do they operate? And so I spent a little bit of time on that one tour trying to find that restaurant, knowing that the next tour it would be necessary. And so we come through Phoenix, and there again, like some sporting event, a minor league baseball game where a few of the guys wanted to go. And a couple of the guys, I knew it wouldn't be their thing, but I knew they wanted to find a nice meal. And, you know, I steered them to this place. And later on, I get an email just being like, man, you know, just when I thought I was doomed food-wise in this city, like in this town, you know, you come up with this gem that just works. And I can't thank you enough for thinking about that and thinking about me.
Right.
You know, and this is the thing with the Radiohead guys, is that they're just the most selfless, you know, musicians I've ever been around, and they are better people than they are musicians, which I think everybody knows. You know, they are.
Yeah, we talked about that juxtaposition yesterday, that there's, you know, such heavy musicians, and then to learn that they're actually, you know, such wonderful people. And you talked a little bit about yesterday, Pete, about how they felt when you came on board. They felt a little bit of that, wow, I don't know what you're doing, but this is such an it's enjoyable, you know. So can you talk a little bit for a moment about that magic that you sprinkled on the Radiohead camp and made it fun for them, or how you did that?
I mean, you know, I really love good food and good experiences and meeting people and enjoying everything. And so I just, you know, I found that they, when I would make suggestions about, hey, we could do this or we could do that, or do you want to guys all have a meal together and so forth, they're really open to it. Really liked the idea of like all being together and doing something, you know, fun and different. And one of the cool things about being with a band like that is that, it opens a lot of doors for experiences that a lot of people will never have.
Right.
And so it's fun to be able to think of things and come up with ideas that can make a day off that much better. And so again, just kind of learning your band and knowing what their interests are and knowing what their diets are and knowing what their sleep patterns are and what they need.
Right.
And those are the details that you then can take and use on days off or on show days,
right.
To create a tour that everybody is really stoked to be a part of and enjoying. We also, I didn't quite mention this yesterday, but we do this great thing before the start of every run. I like to call it the mixer. And it's when our band and crew, after our rehearsal, we all get together and have some drinks and snacks and things, and everybody can catch up a little bit. And all the band is there and management's there and all the crew are there. And it's a really nice way to start off. We all reminding each other we're all in this together. And how important people are, and that it's all about respect,
And it's wonderful to hear you illustrate how you create such a culture of concern and professionalism and care for one another. And so we're now the first Radiohead run, and everyone, it's chugging along, and you have created this wonderful space. And as things happen on the road, you're out there, it's your first run with Radiohead, everything is going fantastic. And there's an unfortunate turn. We're in Toronto and there's an accident. And you are now the leader. And so how does everything that you have learned up until now lend itself to your skill set as you navigate yourself, your band, and your team through something so monumental?
It was really, I don't know, the interesting part of the day was that I would, the band would come over for sound check at some point, usually an hour or two before sound check were to start. And that particular day, production manager had called me and said, we're running a little bit late, running behind with setup. If you can, hold the band back at the hotel, they don't need to be on site anytime soon. And so we delayed the start of sound check. And then I checked back in and was like, what do you think? Should we, come over? He's like, yeah, you come over. Not sure if we're going to be able to sound check. And so we went over to the venue and getting people settled and so forth. And we decided to actually cancel sound check, which in hindsight was the best thing possible in a really, what ended up being a horrible situation. And one is too many. And, but we're really fortunate in the sense that, things were working out that day the way they did, but the accident happened, everyone's stunned. I'm talking to production manager and tour coordinator, and they're really handling things on the crew side of things. And so I'm, gathering the band. I remember, looking at Johnny and just, the two of us, this incredulous feeling. And I'm just like, this isn't why we're here. It's not why we're here. And so it's stunning because it's just nothing you ever want to have happen. And you never want to be worried about it happening because you're doing everything you can to create a safe environment. And our production manager was 1,000,000% on point in terms of doing his job and what needed to be done to keep a safe environment. And the circumstances and what happened is can leave to those circumstances. But my job was, to keep the band together and we had to stick around because the local authorities wanted to ask questions, and but it's nerve-wracking, I think, to have to stay on site when you just want to, be out of the way and let people do their jobs. And so at a certain point, I talked to the local authority and just said, the band didn't witness anything. And if there's statements you need from them, maybe we could do that later. But if it's okay by you, I want to get them back to the hotel, because it also frees up space on site to let the crew, handle their business. There's always when the band's in the building, it's always kind of a different
modicum
vibe.
of lockdown, right?
Yeah.
Not
And
too much unnecessary movement. If you got to get your hustle on, we'd like the act to get out of the way.
Yeah. So we went back to the hotel and got together for dinner, and everybody's kind of asking the question, what do we do now? Can we even continue doing this tour? And so, we sat at dinner and talked about how great things had been up till then, and how much everyone was enjoying it, how much everyone was looking forward to the next leg of tour, which was in Europe, and what to do. And so I just said, when the time's right, I think we need to get back to this. I think as a tour, we need it. I think we need to keep delivering this show to the fans around the world that want to see it. And so I just said, the important thing I think about if we go back is that, people will be on edge, and that's totally understandable. But it's really important that if you have any doubts or anything, that you don't internalize. You got to know that it's okay to talk about it. And I'm here if you want to talk to me, or talk amongst yourselves, or whatever it is. Because again, like, now we're coming from a place of like, we're all a bit, nerves are frayed, and, still just trying to keep, an orderly, organized tour that feels good. And so I just, it's my approach to kind of, bands are often like my kids in a weird way. And I always say I'm like this Jewish grandmother, in the way that I look out for them. And I have like love for my bands. And I told the guys, like, that I love them, and that I believe in them, and I believe in our tour, and I believe that what we're doing, and it's terrible what just happened to us. But if we can get back on the horse and get back to it, we can heal wounds, and we can move forward and keep delivering a great show around the world, and have a great time ourselves traveling and doing shows. And so, everybody, we all went home, and then we were able to, the band decided to get back to it. We rejigged some dates, and then kicked off the tour again in Nîmes, France, this old kind of stone amphitheater, Coliseum type gig that we talked about yesterday, and how much just the vibes in that place, and it's been around forever.
For those listening, there is a proper a medieval Roman Colosseum from the 14 or 1500s that stands in Nîmes, France. That's a gig, and it's a pretty magical place to play. Jim and I have both been through there. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So
it adds some mysticism to whatever you're doing in that place in that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we restarted tour there and had a new production. We took into consideration, the space and the design, and trying to get away from having anything overhead or things that would, make people uneasy. And so the rejig production started there, and the band opened with Lucky, and put pictures of Scott up on the big screens, and just the feeling of like being in touch with the crowd, the understanding from the crowd, and they knew exactly what was going on and what people were feeling on the touring side, but so grateful to have us back, have the band back, and the band so grateful to be able to be back. and I was standing side stage with our head of security, Colin, and you can see the two of us having a little cry and just being stoked to be there together. And it's like, it's so human. It's so human on the road. And it's, again, just another example of like being together with a group and everybody pulling for each other and caring about each other and how important that is.
And you felt such a stronger sense of camaraderie amongst yourselves when you guys got back together.
Yeah. I think it was just, another of the ties that bind, and, it allowed us to, keep moving forward as we needed to. But always, you can't forget what happened, and you have to try and use it. It's an experience nobody wants, but again, it's experience. And there are emergencies, and there are things that happen on tour and on the road. And you have to be, it's important to be ready to be, if those things happen, it's important to be ready to be able to deal with it.
What do you think? And Peter, thank you so much for being so candid about it and sharing some of the grit that you've, been able to apply. Before I hand it over to 5-1, is there one thing that you can think of as a tour manager or as a human that prepared you to keep your focus and your center during that moment, during that situation on the day?
It's just, again, it's the belief in my work, and that sorry, my thing is dinging. You got to be there for the job. You got to stand up. You got to do your job, no matter how hard it is. You've got to accept your position. If you're a guitar tech and something goes wrong on stage and a musician like throws a guitar over to the side of the stage or whatever, like, you can't crumble under that pressure. You got to pick up that guitar and make it right as quickly as you can. And and the same, as a tour manager, I take the role as as being a leader and being the person that people can rely on when it comes to making decisions and dealing with things. And so in those moments, I realize that it's a pressure situation, and I just step up and do my job the way I feel like the job needs to be done. Yeah.
Over to you, 5-1.
So Pete, thank you, Adrian. So Peter, we want to talk about coming full circle with your relationship with John Lafferty. Can you share a few more details about that for us?
Yeah, I for years I'm always thinking, like, how can I tour with John Lafferty again? And tried to get him on a couple gigs, and the timing wasn't right, or the suit didn't fit, if you will. Some gigs we had to wear suits, and I don't think John wanted to wear a suit. But I was out on the Radiohead tour, and we were looking to fill our production manager spot, and so I had I said to the tour coordinator that I had a candidate, and he was, it was his role to do the hiring, which I knew, but I felt that I wanted to put a candidate forward, at least, that I thought could be good for our team. And so I had asked John if he was interested, and he was interested, and the timing was right. And so I sent him the crew page from our tour book, from the Radiohead tour book, and asked John to tell me everybody he's worked with, or at least knows in that list of people. And he sent it back, and I sent that on to the tour coordinator, just again as a, like, I put a candidate forward, and here's some information to help you make a decision. It's your decision. And it turned out John had worked with or knew, a good handful of people on the list. And I think that ended up being helpful information for our tour coordinator to, talk to our crew and be like, yeah, do you know this guy? Have you worked with this guy? And everybody who knew him or had worked with him, gave a big thumbs up. And so we hired John in 2018 as our production manager, and he was exactly what we needed at that time. You know, his style, his approachability, his caring, everything about it was perfect, and it's been an amazing experience since. And we've done, you know, a bunch of runs with Radiohead now. We did the Tom York Tomorrow's Modern Boxes stuff in 2018 and 2019, you know, with John at the helm. And part of the beauty of it all for me, one thing coming full circle and having gone from John's assistant in 2000 to working as a team together, tour manager, production manager, you know, 18 years later, it's the trust and faith I have in John doing his job. And no matter what it is, he handles everything, and he handles it with aplomb. I think we were in Italy doing some outdoor gig, and the stage was still being sort of put together with the sound and the audio and everything. And you know, it was the reason we had a show that day was because John was there, and he worked with the locals and pulled it together. Things were delayed, things were happening off schedule, and John just like pulled it all together. And that's you know, one example of, you know, an incredible experience working with that guy. He works so hard, he cares so much. He's, you know, you can always walk into the production office and get his ear. It's never, nothing's too big, nothing's too small. And then he's just a hell of a lot of fun, you know, on off days, you know, our band and crew mixers, whatever it is, like, you know, seeing John around, it's just like, it's like a comfort blanket, you know.
And it's so beautiful to hear that with him having helped you so much in the early stages of your career, that you were able to repay the favor and bring him onto the Dream Tour. You know, I'm sure we're all fanning out here. Radiohead are one of those bands that not only are they one of the biggest bands in the world, but if you're interested in music, there's a pretty damn good chance Radiohead is your favorite band. So, you know, I wanted to ask, and you kind of alluded to this earlier in a way when you were talking about Morrissey and being hired as a production manager, and perhaps dealing with a little bit of what we've now come to call imposter syndrome, and questioning yourself, am I ready for this? How do I make myself ready for this if I'm not? Has there been any point in your career, and I'm thinking particularly in regards to getting the Radiohead job, where you've taken a step up, you've leveled up in any meaningful way, and how did you prepare for that?
I think all along my career path has been, you know, meeting these new challenges. When I started, you know, my first like real TM gig where I was advancing and everything, like with Jerry, it was me, an accountant and the lawyer. There was no manager. And I remember being sat there and it was that be careful what you ask for moment, where I was like, holy shit, this is a lot. I got to do all this stuff. But I kept reminding myself that, you know, this is what I asked for. This is my career path. It's no more dress rehearsal. This is my life. It's not, I'm not in school anymore figuring it out. This is the real world. And this is what I asked for. This is what I want. And I have to believe in myself, believe in my abilities. And every tour along the way has been, you know, taking what I've learned, but keeping my eyes open to keep learning and using all the experience to meet the challenge of whatever that tour is. And with the Radiohead world, you know, the timing of it couldn't have been better. I was at a place in my career where I had enough understanding and had learned enough that I felt, you know, I was like, holy shit, this is Radiohead. It's my favorite band in the world. And now I'm going to be working with them. I'm like, that's Colin Greenwood over there. That guy's, he's a legend, you know? And I'm like, again, in that moment, I'm like, be careful what you ask for. But I reminded myself, I asked for this. And I constantly, you know, reminding myself that I'm here for a reason and that I'm good at what I'm doing, that I care. And if I don't know, I'll ask, no excuses, always just trying to, move forward. And so it's been the whole of my career that's given me, experiences that the ones I started with, I'm still using today and adding on, and it never stops. You can't stop learning. You can't stop, wanting to try and stay, we talked about 1, 2, 3, 4 steps ahead, 15 steps, I think is where we ended up, which is a good, ode to a great song. So yeah, that's that.
Peter, this has been such an incredible webinar today, just hearing your story. And as we kind of close here, I have a couple more points. Can you tell us a little bit about your mentors that you had coming up? And also, to close out, do you have any words of wisdom for our audience and students today?
Yeah, mentors. My cousin Chris, obviously, is such a huge part of me being where I am today and giving me the opportunity and the lessons he gave me. I didn't mention it yesterday, but my great uncle owned a jazz club outside Boston when I was just born. But the stories he used to tell me, it was dinner and a show, and he would book the acts, he'd cook the dinner, he'd put on the show, he'd MC the show, and he taught me about, that was an early lesson about the importance of everyone and the importance of all the details. And so my Uncle Lenny, my cousin Chris started with my family, and then get out to San Francisco, and Nigel James, production manager at BGP, who gave me that opportunity and was constantly, in his amazing barking way, giving me all sorts of information to take on and learn from. I think I had left some tickets for somebody at a hotel, and the hotel cocked it up. And he's like, "Did you get the name of the person you left him with?" And I was like, "Shit, I don't think I did." He's like, "Those are the details you need to know." And I was like, so good to know. Nigel has done as much for me as anybody to help me get where I am. Promoters like Don Strasberg in Denver, who taught me little things about settlement and so forth. And he'll always be like, "You weren't supposed to turn that around on me," but I think I might have one time. But Don was incredible and very helpful. A bunch of managers and artists and crew, so many to name, but people who've just been so amazing to work with and learn from. And words of wisdom, I think, find something that you really love to do, because you're going to have to do it every day. And when you find that thing, go after it and do whatever you can to be around it. Don't be afraid to do the small things. Don't be afraid of the big things and everything in between. I think that, love for everything is probably the most important thing for yourself, for your friends and your family, your coworkers, in our business, for the fans, for everybody involved. I always say, like, if things stem from love, like, it's just a win. So that's my approach, and this has been great. I love this, and I love all of you. Thank you,
Peter. Thank you so much for coming in, sprinkling some love and light on our 1-year anniversary show. Really fantastic. This really reminds us why we do this.
Yeah. And if I may, I'm so proud to be associated with all of you, and that's one of the goals. I mean, Henry, make sure to find me next time and just ask whoever you have to ask. It's never a bother. I might be like, can't right now, right, but it's never a bother. And I'm so proud to know you all, and to be, to think that I can be a part of this with you is just incredible, you know.
That's really sweet words of you to say,
For-
Peter.
for-
I mean, because all of us over here feel like your story, we all sort of saw ourselves in your story. And I think, and I hope that our students see themselves in your story too as they go, because we've been, everything that we sort of saw and learned from you, we've been talking about for the past year and teaching those fundamentals. And so it was just a beautiful way to see it all come to fruition. And that's why we do these discussion with series, guys, because it, you know, putting it to practice and really seeing how people's lives span out is incredible. So, Peter, thank you. Great job.
Aces.
Yeah.
Aces. It was beautiful. Thank you so much.
You really pulled the last year together. Like seriously, like you just
So good.
Yeah, it was just the way you weaved the fundamentals that we've been teaching into every segment of your story. It just, you know, it solidified that we're really weaving a tapestry, and everything that you do and everything that you learn and everyone that you meet becomes an asset in your chest of, you know, it's really great, Pete. Thank you so much.
And Radiohead should be grateful that they have you. So
And also Radiohead, right? And also
those dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to my colleagues.
Can I real quickly?
Yeah, please.
I had a little dog, and she would tour with us, and she was like everyone's emotional support animal. And she left us last week.
Aww.
This is just a little cartoon of her that a friend gave me, but and I might just sneak off behind this photo now and have a little cry.
Oh, we love the dog.
Thank you so much.
Peter, thank you so much. And thank you to the magnificent 7 of TM 101 for making this past year so bearable.
Yeah.
And spreading light.
Thanks
so
thanks
much,
to,
everybody.
Thank you.
to all our friends for joining us each Monday.
And I can't wait to get back to shows and seeing everybody at festivals.
True story.
And,
Yes.
and it's going to happen. So let's all just keep the good thought.
Till next week, everybody. This is TM 101. Be safe.
All right.
everyone.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.